Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's good to be with you today here at the facility. I know I'm going to hear it from my buddy Shy because I don't have a better background, but this is the media room that they have, and this is where I got to work with. I want to start today. I just had a really long conversation with Aiden O'Connell in the locker room. That video should already be up. Uh, it was him and I talking. I think some other people brought some cameras around, but it was an interview that with him and I. He is 100%. I'm not in any way implying that there is a um, quarterback controversy. I'm not expecting him to be trotted out there and start at all. Um, I would be stunned whenever they decide he's ready to be elevated. I would be stunned if he's not the number two guy. So I understand the most popular man in every city is the pro hockey team's backup goalie and the pro football team's backup quarterback. That's an old adage, but it's true. But he is 100% feeling good. We're both commiserating with our collective Big Ten schools football seasons, but thanking God it's basketball season. So, hey, uh, just wanted to tell you about that one. He looked good. He is 100%. He told me that. Um, and it was good to see him. I've talked to him throughout the process of getting healthy, but it was nothing of which I was going to talk about until he was ready to come back. Um, but he looks good. Actually, I didn't ask him about this, but he looks beefier, looks muscular. So it's very clear he's been working out. Um, and who knows how that works because with a wrist, I don't think he would have been doing a ton of lifting, but he looked to be in really good shape. And Aiden's always in good spirits. That's his nature as a human being, which is good. So there you go. There's an update on Aiden. Um, I want to talk to you a little bit. I asked Chip uh, Chip Kelly a question today, and it was a loaded question, but it wasn't a got you question. I want to explain why. So travel back with me, if you would, to the combine. I think all of us were a little surprised when Pete Carroll and John Spytek were both very adamant that they were very happy with the Raiders' offensive line. I'm going to tell you why this is important. If you watch this podcast or you listen to the press conferences, I am not in any way afraid to ask a tough question. At the same time, I'm not afraid to paddle upstream when the crowd feeling goes one direction for me to go the other. Now, let me tell you something. Every time I do that, it costs me followers, but I believe it helps me in the long run because you then start to build a track record of integrity with people. You're not a blowhard. You're not a click based person. You're just a truth teller. So I want to go back to before when last season was coming to an end and they decided to move on from AP. You may remember I talked to you about the importance of a symbiotic relationship from management to coaching to ownership, everybody being on the same page. And then you may remember they lost um, Robert Spillane in the offseason. And I said at the time, and I maintain it was an epic failure by this organization. But I also came out and told you it was not a John Spytek problem. I need you to understand something here. I'm not carrying weight for anybody, but I want to go back because this is proof of performance. And I explain to you, Spy comes in and he's trying to evaluate talent, and bam, you get hired. It's combine, it's draft, free agency, boom, 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 over. And I said, the guy deserves a mulligan. Telesco was going to re sign Spillane. That was going to happen. All of a sudden, they want to kind of pull back and evaluate everybody, and that happens. It's part of where this organization continues to shoot itself in the foot year after year after year. When you're constantly changing coaches and constantly changing general managers and constantly changing coordinators, okay, you run into this. So they got here, they look and say, yeah, okay, offensive line looks pretty good. I don't think that they would have that same evaluation today. Um, and I don't mean with the guys who are playing now, just in totality, I think. But so then that leads to, okay, we got here, we've saw some things on tape. There's no practices prior to the draft and free agency. So you make decisions. You take a couple of offensive linemen that are probably going to need to develop. Grant, especially more than Rodgers. And I'm going to be honest, I think Grant is more developed right now than Rodgers, which is a humongous testimony to him. That's not a slam on Caleb Rodgers. It's just the reality. Rather than maybe go with some guys who maybe were a little bit more ready. But hey, these are guys we really like. These are guys we really believe in. And I know other NFL teams did too. Now, I don't know any other teams that were interested in Damon Arnett. I knew there were other teams interested in Tyree Wilson. Okay. Alex Leatherwood, I did not know another team that was willing to go that high with him. I knew some teams that thought he was a, second round guy. I knew some other team. I knew of one team that liked him high, that would have taken him where the Raiders took Alex Leatherwood, but only one. There were multiple teams that liked William Grant and Caleb Rogers, multiple, because I heard from several when they picked them, that they felt like the Raiders got some incredible long term value there. So, where are you going with this, Hondo? Here's where I'm going with this. Pete and John get in here, you know, you're trying to evaluate the talent you have. You're trying to evaluate free agents. You're trying to look into everything. You're drinking, like, it's like drinking water. Remember when you were a kid? Nowadays, kids have water bottles. But remember when, if you're my age, when you were a kid, you'd play outside, you'd drink out of a hose. You're trying to drink water out of a fire hose. So, do I think that Pete and John thoroughly misread the offensive line? I did. And that's why you may remember several of us beat guys uh, were a little shocked when they said that at the combine. Um, I'm going to give Spy and Pete a mulligan there. There just wasn't enough time and no practices to get an evaluation. But clearly, the offensive line is a major piece of pain in this organization. So you say, what's that got to do with me? Um, Let me tell you what it does. Number one, I said to Chip, how much right now is the offensive line impacting play calling? And he gave a really long, thorough answer that I would hope many of you would go read because it is impacting play calling. It absolutely has a tremendous impact. So let's go back to the last game. They came out and said, we're gonna throw the ball, we're gonna play action pass. They moved the football. And then they get to the red zone where it's a compact area. And with that Dallas Cowboys defensive line, it was very difficult to do much. The point is, the play calling moved the ball. It did. That's the reality of it. The problem is with their offensive line, it limits what you can call. So it's one thing to sit here and beat up Pete and beat up Chip and say, you should have seen this, should have done this, should have done, and all of that's fair. But they also have to call things that they think are going to work. And I said this after the game. You can go back and watch the podcast for proof of performance. You're asking, okay, you don't like how many times Ashton ran. And I didn't. But the fact is, he had one carry for 11 yards and basically had 1 yard per carry average. I mean, he went backwards most of the time because you couldn't block the defensive line. So this is where you have to understand, and there needs to be an element of grace asking. So let me give you a quick one. If Patrick Mahomes goes down, you don't have a Patrick Mahomes backing him up. You can't afford that. And unless he's a super young player who people don't know he's that yet, then he's going to make super young player mistakes. So you look at any team, look at the Bengals without Joe Burrow. And so you lose a Colton Miller, you lose a JPJ, you got a Will Putnam who's in there. You know, it I got a lot of people emailing frustrated that they would put Jordan at guard, but not JPJ. And I understand that frustration. Right or wrong, I don't agree with it. I'll say that right up front. Their evaluation is JPJ was a much better guard than Meredith. Okay, that's a compliment to him because they think Meredith is a pretty good guard, but they think he is a better center than what JPJ can do at guard. JPJ goes down, they move him to center to guard, bring in Will Putnam. It wasn't a slam against JPJ. If anything, it was a testimony to how good of a guard they think he can be. Now, I don't like all the crap in the preseason where he's competing against Kappa. That was nonsensical to me. I don't get it. It makes no sense. So I'm not pretending here to rewrite history and to tell you why I'm to do revisionist history. I didn't agree with them at the combine. I understood why they had that opinion. I didn't agree um, with the messing around with JPJ in the preseason. Didn't agree with that. But I'm also trying to let people to understand it isn't like these guys forgot football. Some things you just can't do. Okay, so let me give you an example. You know, I it was very funny today that Chip brought this up. You're not running the speed option like you do in college. You're going to get guys killed. Let's talk about Myles Garrett. Okay, he's 270 pounds. He runs like a fast linebacker. The guy's on pace to set the NFL record for sacks in a season. God only knows what he's going to do this weekend. Okay. Geno Smith, the reason you don't see a lot of the speed option in the pros is because you have defensive tackles with the same speed as quarterbacks, and you're going to get your quarterback killed. That was my biggest concern about Jaden Daniels. I told you all of that. So as the Raiders are sitting here today, you're thinking, okay, they got a lot of guys down in the defensive backfield, the Browns. So my inclination is with the way this team is blocking and the ferocity of the Browns defense, which Chip said, and I agree with him, is the best defense they've faced all year. That is a scary thought. You got to get the ball out quick, and you're going to have to attack through the air. Okay, it's not Chip's fault that they traded Jacoby, and that's not Geno's fault. That's the reality. So now you've got to, and in the last two games, Geno didn't have any, both interceptions hit guys in the hands. If it touches skin, you got to bring it in. And so my point is, I'm not being an apologist for anybody. I was very honest when I thought Geno did not play well. I was very honest when I did not like some of Chip's play calling. But I'm also going to be the guy that says to you, you're sitting here now in week 12, you're down 40% of your offensive line and guys playing out of position. So you could technically say you're down 60% of your offensive line and going against the best defense. Okay, it's not a matter of what do you want to do. Do you want to get Ashton killed? So I fully expect them to come out with a quick passing attack, hopefully make Cleveland call off the dogs, pun intended, and then to be able to try to run the football. Maybe try to get a lead and then just try to wear the clock out. But it's just important to be fair because I look at my email and a lot of people, ripping and tearing, and that's fine. It's fine. But I think you also need to look at, there's been a lot of problems. Did Spytek make a bad evaluation of the line? Yeah, but it's understandable why. So then how does that proceed to next year, Hondo? Everybody wants everybody fired. And I don't call for people's jobs before 21 games are over. I don't do that. It's just not me. I don't think it's professional. I think there are too many things that I've seen. So, for example, I wouldn't fire Spytek. That would be stupid. Yep. Did he make some mistakes not signing Spillane? Sure did. He wasn't here. That's on the organization. It's not on Spy. Did he make some problems evaluating the offensive line prior to the draft? He did. That's organizational issues. I'm not firing Spytek. I think there are some picks that he made that were really good, and some that need to be fettered out and need to do the test of time. Same thing. What did I say to you about Tyree Wilson? You're going to grade him after year 4. There were a lot of teams that liked him, a lot that absolutely were not going to touch him before the 3rd or 4th round with that injury. We're going to find out if Dave Ziegler was right. But the point is, I don't think the answer is firing Spytek. Okay, everyone, I want Chip Kelly fired. Okay, great. But the guy knows how to call games, and he's had to deal with a juxtaposing. Now, you may say it doesn't matter, I want him gone. That's fine. That's an option that a lot of people have. There's a lot of people saying this offense is nonsensical. I have said it, but it's also nonsensical. But you have to look at who's in there, who's not, what can they do, what can't they do. Okay, then you look at Pete. Okay, let's walk through this. Grew. The NFL went after him. Mark Davis could have kept him, chose not to. They chose to move on. And it wasn't like Mark Davis went out and said, I hate you, I'm firing you. No, I think that was more John loving Mark and the Raiders and saying, hey, I'll go. But there were a lot of people that wanted Grew fired before that year. I had tons of email. Why are you kissing Grew's butt? You need to call for Grew to get fired. He yada, 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 yada. He only won with Tony Dungy's guys, whatever. So then they turn around and, Rich Bisaccia did a really good job. No, we don't want an inexperienced coach. Okay, fine. I'm a guy that says the Raiders are one of those franchises. You don't, they have had some success with first time coaches. I 100% agree. And you can go have success with first time coaches. But if I'm Mark Davis, I want the most proven guy. My fan base has gone way too long. And there's such a much bigger risk with a young coach. Now, that being said, if they move on from Pete this year, I fully expect they're going to go with a young coach. I fully expect that. I'll get into more on that after the year. I'm not calling for that. But they move on from Rich, they go with Josh McDaniels, the hottest name. And he was, whether you like it or not, he was. Everybody, oh, this guy forgot how to coach. He's no good if he doesn't have Tom Brady. I remember saying at the time, what about Mac Jones? He did really good with Mac his rookie year. No, he sucks. Okay, great. Get rid of him. That brings in AP, another young, hot coach, an interim guy like Bisaccia was. There's a lot of people in this building that felt like they should have hired Bisaccia. So they go with AP. And, they put AP with Getsy. It wasn't who AP wanted. And, they didn't go get a quarterback that AP wanted. And there was a strong push to go Gardner and not Aiden. All right. So AP doesn't work out. Then you go and you bring in Pete. Okay. This is a guy that, whether you hate him now or not, one of the top 5 coaches in the game's history, one of less than a handful who've won championships in college and pros. Okay. He hasn't forgotten how to coach. I'm telling you, and you don't have to believe me, those players love him. There's no hatred towards him. There's no anger towards him. Nobody's mad at him. Are there things that players would like to see differently? Yes. But there are things Pete would like to see differently. And so you're sitting here now and you're trying to figure out where is our franchise. I'm using your voice, not mine, because I'm not a fan and I'm not an owner, so it's not mine. If you want to make all these wholesale changes, that's fine. But then you what you need to know is you're putting in jeopardy 26. Or do you make the decision, all right, after this season, we all got to come together. We have to decide who's all on one page and who's not. Now, maybe they have a meeting and Brady and Davis and Spytek say, they meet first, this is what we want. And then they meet with coordinators and they meet with the coach and say, this is what we want to do. No, I don't think so. We think this. Okay, then we're going to part ways. Maybe they sit down and say to Pete, Pete, listen, we're going to take an approach. We're going to be a playoff team for the next 20 years, starting in 27. So 26 has to be a rebuilding year for us. Pete may say, no, I'm only know one way, guys, and it's to win every week. I talked about this yesterday. Okay. Then I think you say, okay, Pete, sorry, this isn't going to work for us because we don't think we're in win mode right now. We got to develop some people. Fine, great. You part ways, everybody's buddies. You make it a mutual thing, but you still keep. Then Chip may say, yeah, I'm game with that. Let's go. And they may say, great, we want you. No problem. Yeah, that. I want to address one other issue that I think is important. Um, Patrick Graham is highly respected around the NFL. And if you listen to people who know football, this does not entirely look like a Patrick Graham defense. And so everybody has bosses. I was talking with one of the Raider players today off the record, so I'm not going to tell you who it was because it was off the record. But I was talking to them about, you know, everybody has bosses, and sometimes fans don't understand that. You know, if they tell Max Crosby, we want you to do this, and he doesn't, it doesn't work. And everyone's like, oh, look at Crosby, he had a terrible game. And it wasn't Max who I was talking to, but that's not on Max. He has bosses. And so where I'm going with this is I agree this does not look like a Patrick Graham defense. I agree that at times this year they have played super, super well. I agree last game they were really struggling. And I'm feeling for Patrick. And this is where, when you're part of a losing organization, it hurts you. I was talking to somebody yesterday and I had another NFL team. And they were talking about an assistant who wanted to leave and they didn't want to lose him. And the assistant basically said, I want to be a head coach in this league. And I don't mean this to be rude to you. I can't make it here from there. I can't make it from here to there. I need to go step back, take a lower position somewhere else, work my way back up. So, because I'm getting stained because of the organization. I understand people are mad at the defense, and when they are, they're going to blame Patrick. I understand they're mad at the offense. When they are, they're going to blame Chip Kelly. And when they're mad at everything, they're going to be mad at Pete Carroll. And when they're mad at Pete Carroll and everything, they're going to be mad at Spytek. And when they're mad at Spytek, Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, and Patrick Graham, they're going to be mad at Tom Brady and Mark Davis. I get that. I understand it. And they understand it as well. But the reality is, this is not a good football team, doesn't have a lot of depth. There were some decisions I think that were wrong decisions early in the year to go with some older players and maybe not develop some younger guys. I think this is going to hurt 26, but there's still 7 games left. But I just think it's important. I agree with all of you. This was an unacceptable season the way it's gone heretofore. I believe Mark Davis, if he was sitting here in the room with me, would say, amen, Hondo, I agree. I think Tom Brady would as well. I think John Spytek would say it. I think Pete Carroll would say it. I think Chip Kelly would say it. I think Patrick Graham would say it. I think every member of the organization would agree with me there. That is germane to point that out. It's germane to not like this offense's performance, but you also have to understand it in perspective. I think there are clear finger pointing you can make into why they're here. All fair. When your head coach and your general manager at the combine say that they like the offensive line, that's on them because this is granted 60%, but still what you have in that locker room, you guys endorsed. But if you're being fair, you go back to previous years, and I've pointed it out with every regime. This is what happens when you have change. So you as a fan base have every single right to demand whatever you want. I'm not going to mock you. I'm not going to agree with you. That's not my job. My job is to take the information, assimilate it, and hand it to you, to give it to you. Then you can make whatever decision you want. But remember, just firing everybody has not proven to be the answer for this organization. Going back how far? The trading of Grew? I mean, this goes back decades. At some point, Roy Rogers, who was an old Westerns actor years ago in the black and white era, he was a great horseman, and I'm a horse person. If you guys, I think I've shared that with you before, but I'm a horseman. I love horses, owned horses most of my life. I'm a horse guy. Used to say the best thing for a young horse is a wet saddle blanket. A blanket's what you put under your saddle so it doesn't rub the horse's hair off and really irritate and do damage to the flesh, to the skin. And what that literally means is the best thing for a young horse is you just got to ride them. You just got to stay on them. They're going to make stupid horse mistakes, and it's how you train them. A lot of people will look at a really, really good horse and say, man, I want a horse. Then they go buy a cheap one and it's bucking and it doesn't listen and it doesn't, I've had horses that you can get on. Um, I remember I had a very large, almost a 19 hand, which is a massive, it's size of a Budweiser Clydesdale Belgian. I like to ride the drafts horses because I'm a big guy. And I had a 2-year-old son that I let ride my Belgian. Her name was Digger. Uh, he rode Digger at 2 years old. Something came up that would spook a young horse, she'd look at it and just like, didn't care. But if you saw her and said, man, I want to go buy that horse, so you go find a big Belgian and you buy a Belgian and whatever, and it's not trained, it's going to jump, it's going to make all stupid, or you're going to get your 2-year-old killed. Here is my point. Please hear my point. This organization's in a spot right now that they have to think about winning in the future. You got some young players that need some wet saddle blankets. They're going to take lumps. They're going to take lumps. Now, I think the worst mistake made this year, and I'm going to be frank, and I'm his supporter, but I think the worst mistake Pete Carroll made, or anyone in this organization, is early on when he said, hey, we're used to winning 10 games a year. I understand why Pete Carroll said it. Number one, he's the ultimate optimist. Number two, he wants to sell his guys on compete. And how am I competing if I say anything else? I understand the quagmire that Pete was in, but that was a day that he was speaking to Raider Nation. And I remember, if I'm wrong, I'm not lying, but I think it was my buddy Vinny Bonsignor from the Las Vegas Review Journal. Him and I were standing next to each other when Pete said that. I think it was him. If it wasn't him, I apologize. But I'm may have been Case Kiefer, but I want. But anyways, we looked at each other. Okay, and Raider Nation ran with that because they're like a parched, dehydrated person in the desert begging for someone to put water on the tip of their finger and just let me taste water again. That was a bad day for this organization. Do I think that is the only mistake made? No, there are lots of them, and we'll talk about it in the offseason. But making mistakes doesn't mean people are failures. There's a lot of people in this organization that have hardware. have hardware. That says something. It's worth something. And I understand why you're mad, because it looks like another person in this organization sold you something that didn't come about. You notice I'm not mad at the fans. I'm not mad at the organization. I just see why. But again, Pete comes in, competing, excited. Just going to give that tidbit though. I would come in and put everybody together. First thing I'm doing if I'm Mark is I'm sitting down with Tom saying, okay, what is it exactly? And Richard Seymour, let me just say something. I believe it's been disrespectful that I don't bring up Richard's names more. That guy, you see him and he's a mountain of a human being, but the only thing bigger than that guy's frame is his brain. This guy knows football. He's a smart football guy. Good guy, by the way, but he's a smart football guy. And when I say Tom, I'm always including the ownership, Richard Seymour, in that. But some people have taken me to say, do you not think Richard? No, I think Richard Seymour is a smart football brain. But I think you bring Richard, you bring Tom in the room with Mark Davis, not Spy. What do we want? Then you sit down with Spy. This is what we want. And then you let him go. And then you put Pete in the room saying, this is where we want to go. Are you on board with what we want to do? And again, if Spy says, I'm not into that, all right, I don't think that's going to happen, but okay. If Pete says, no, I'm on board, great. Then you bring in the coordinators. I think it's going to be really hard for the Raiders to keep Patrick Graham. I think being part of the Raiders has hurt him. And I think it would be beneficial for him to be somewhere else. I don't want to see him go as a man that personally cares for and likes him as a human and as a person. But the Raiders have, I'll get into all of that in the offseason. That said, you then get everybody on one page. That's what Hondo Carpenter would do, but I'm not the owner and I'm not a fan. So you don't have to give a lick what I think, and neither does anyone else. But I think that's a fair assessment of where this franchise is right now. Do I think there's going to be there should be a rebuilding process? I do. But I told you all offseason, this is not a rebuild. This is not a rebuild, it's a reload, because that's what they felt. Well, now I'm telling you what I think. I think it is a partial rebuild. I had someone email me, and I don't know who said this, but I had somebody emailed me today that they heard someone say that this team could need as many as 18 new starters next year. I don't think 18 is a number, but I think it's a high number. I think it's a really high number. I don't think 18, but I think it's very high. So I'm not going to argue with that. But there's some guys here. There's some players here. There's good, hardworking people here. And I just think sometimes the easiest thing to do is to just scream, fire everybody. Well, guess what? That's what you've done. It's what you've done. I think Mark, Tom, Richard need to get one vision. Make sure the GM's on it, make sure the coaches are on it, make sure that the coordinators are on it, and then go. And you know what? Like I said, if anyone doesn't want to, you part friends. God bless you. But that's the reality of where the Raiders are. Again, tomorrow we'll talk to Pete, have a lot more for you. Appreciate all of you. Have a great day. God bless you from here at Raiders headquarters.